This is the chapter from Deuteronomy, chapter 34, verses 1 through 12, that tells the story of Moses' death. Follow along on the screen. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho, and the Lord showed him the whole land. Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah, as far as the western sea, the Negeb and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. And the Lord said, "This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I've let you see it with your own eyes, but you shall not cross over." Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command. He was buried in a valley in the land of Moab opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows his burial place to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired, and his vigor had not abated. The Israelites wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the period of mourning for Moses was ended. Joshua, son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid hands on him, and the Israelites obeyed him, doing as the Lord had commanded Moses. Never since has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. He was unequaled for all the signs and wonders that the Lord sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his servants and his entire land, and for all the mighty deeds and all the terrifying displays of power that Moses performed in the sight of Israel. If I were to say the words to you once upon a time, you would know I was starting a story. Those words have pulled us in since we were children. And beginnings like that are wide open doors, whether we're being invited to go out and explore the great outdoors or to come inside the house for a more intimate tale. Endings, on the other hand, are harder to deal with or to do well. Life is a lot like a Saturday Night Live skit, I think. It starts with a good premise, but most of the time the ending never really pays off. It's a little confusing, and we all have a lot riding on how the story ends. I read an article in the Washington Post this week that asked readers, what book has the most disappointing ending? The article was written by a book reviewer who made a point of saying they never give away the ending of a book when they review it. But endings are what most readers want to talk about. True for both books and movies, right? How everything wraps up has a huge impact on how we feel about the story. Though it's considered great literature, Romeo and Juliet isn't the feel-good play of the summer. And we're still willing to sit through all the hard boxing scenes to see the triumph of Rocky enduring the fight and believing in himself, even though he didn't win. It was a great ending. Yesterday was a big day at our house because the Hallmark Channel started showing their Christmas movies. Though it's still way too early for me to start watching them regularly, I'll admit I enjoy them. Part of the comfort that they offer is that you can see the ending coming from a mile away. About 15 or 20 minutes before the movie is over, regardless of the rest of the plot, the couple that seem destined to be together from the start face something that pulls them apart. A misunderstanding, a change of circumstance, and then with about 10 minutes left, right after the last commercial break, they realize their mistake and they find their way back to each other. The very thing we wanted Romeo and Juliet to do, and they messed up. There are lights and snow and love and, well, Merry Christmas. Imagine, though, how the ratings would be if after 2 hours of drawing two people together, the credits started rolling right after they walked away from each other. And we didn't get that last 10 minutes. we wouldn't be watching them all Christmas season. One of the observations that we make about the Bible is that it's more of a library, an anthology, if you will, than a single book. Perhaps we'd do better to call it a book of stories, some more connected than others, but all of them telling the big story of the relationship between God and creation and how we keep trying to learn how to be human. The Christian New Testament is interesting because Paul wrote most of his letters before the Gospels were written down. And though the Gospels come first in the way we read the Bible now, they were the last ones written. Paul started writing down ideas, but the early Christians realized what mattered most were the stories about Jesus. The Hebrew Bible, on the other hand, is pretty much stories from beginning to end. The Torah, or the books of Moses, where we have been camped out for a couple of weeks, are a 5-part set that starts with creation and ends with the Hebrew people on the verge of entering the land God had promised them. Today's passage is the last chapter of the Torah, of the 5 books, the big finish. And as we saw, it gives an account of the death of Moses. It's quite a scene. The preceding chapter holds Moses' final blessing to the people, and then God takes him up another mountain. Once again, it's just the two of them, God and Moses. And it seems Moses knew that he was playing his final scene. He had said what he had to say to the people, and then he walked up the mountain with God. He already knew he was not going to get to cross over into the promised land. God had made that clear. But the narrator says God let him see the land in every direction, which is actually not physically possible from Mount Pisgah. So something deeply mystical was going on, not unlike the burning bush, perhaps, where Moses' story started. Why Moses couldn't go into Canaan is unclear. Commentators offer many different explanations because that's what commentators do. But what matters most is that he wasn't going to cross over. He had had to live, and now he was going to have to die with that fact. For all that he had done and seen God do, he was going to die before the story was finished. He got to make his big speech and bless the nation, but then he died alone on the mountain with God and was buried in an unmarked grave so the spot would not be remembered or enshrined. And the narrator closes this chapter by saying, there never was another one like Moses. I have to say, one of the things that came to mind for me as I read Moses' final scene was Martin Luther King's speech to the sanitation workers in Memphis on the night before he was killed. Though he didn't know he was going to be murdered the next day, he seemed to know the ending was at hand. And he said, well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me now because I have been to the mountaintop and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and God's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land. He was shot and killed on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel the next morning. Both Moses and Dr. King knew life had to be about more than checking off everything on their bucket lists. Moses lived a long life and King a relatively short one. Neither were finished with what they hoped to do, and they both knew the story of their lives was a part of a larger, more epic tale. They're gone, and we keep telling their stories because they're still a part of the larger story that has continued beyond their deaths. The story of us still trying to figure out what it means to be human. The writer Anais Nin, in a quote she attributed to the Talmud, wrote, "We do not tell stories as they are. We tell stories as we are." Poet and theologian Padre Gotuma says that telling stories is the only way for life to become a verb. I recently published a book about the way grief connects us to one another, called The Color of Together. In one of my paragraphs, I wrote, "My father is dead, but my story with him is not over. I am still turning periods into commas and sometimes vice versa. I am still remembering our life together and revising how I think of him and of us as new insights arise. The story of our lives is not over yet. We are still adding pages. I am still living memories." We are a week away from All Saints' Day, when we will be particularly mindful of those who died this year, and I know those losses are significant for this congregation. We know what it's like to keep telling the story of our lives after some of our most beloved characters are gone. The Hebrew people did too. They buried Moses in an unmarked grave and went on to the Promised Land, carrying his memory and adding to the story. Listen to Padre Gotuma once again. "To live well is to see wisely, and to see wisely is to tell stories, and to tell stories is to tell of things that are always changing, because even if the stories don't change, the teller does. So the story always moves." I have two people in my life whose parents died this week, one from COVID-19 and the other from finally running out of gas at 95. Death comes, life ends, things change. And through it all, we keep telling the story of our lives, to remember who we are, who we have been, and who we are becoming. Once upon a time. Amen. I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longing as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme and glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story for those who know it best, seem hungering and thirsting to hear it like the rest. And when in scenes of glory I sing a new song, 'twill be the old story that I have loved so long. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme and glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. To tell the old story of Jesus and